So this is why we organize a series of webinars. So yesterday, those of you who already participated yesterday already know that we focused on the COP27 and our demand. But today, we will focusing on the region and industrial supply chain with a specific focus on oil gas mining sector, as well as MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa region. And tomorrow, we will have a joint webinar with ITF, International Transport Workers Federation, in the mobility sector with a special focus on the maritime sector. And we will also organize a social media storm on the 4th of November to make our demand clear ahead of COP27. But again, today, we will focus on this supply chain, due diligence, the regions, the sectors, which are most affected by the climate change. Oil and gas mining sector, MENA Sub-Saharan region is the area which are most affected by this climate change discussion. So why we focus on this supply chain due diligence? Because we see no proper social dialogue on the just transition in many countries so far, especially in the global south, where we find serious fundamental workers' rights violation, and where the fossil fuel energy supply chain is located. And we see quite many unions are not given proper information from the government, from the employer, so that they are not able to get involved in the just transition planning discussion. So we need to develop union capacity on the due diligence or using due diligence tool to make sure our workers' voices are heard in the just transition processes. And why we focus on oil, gas, and mining? Because these are the sectors which are most affected by climate change. According to international energy agencies, total energy sector employment increases from just over 65 million today to 19 million in 2030 in the net to zero scenario, a net to zero emission scenario. And new jobs created in the new energy, clean energy industry, and which will reach 40 million jobs by 2030. But the fossil fuel jobs decreased by 7 million by 2030, which include this oil and gas and mining sector, if we conduct this net zero emission scenario. But this is not, this is not avoidable. So we need to upgrade our skills, our workers, to adapt this new industry, which is clean energy industry, for make just transition. And why we focus on this MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa region, that is because the last time COP26, the many countries agreed and promises that they will secure $100 billion US financing to support the developing countries. Then COP27 is already nicknamed as Africa's COP, because this is the opportunity for the African countries to how they properly use this the finance processes, then how they actually create the concrete, the planning and implementation on this climate finance delivery plan. So for this COP27, it's really, really crucial COP for developing countries, especially for North America and North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa region. So we are facing very historic changes and transformation, and we need to adapt to that. So that's why we need to have these just transition processes, and we need to catch up the speed of changes and this just transition transformation. So I will finish now for my opening remarks. Then I will now would like to give floor to our Assistant General Secretary, Kemal Uzkan, who is responsible for the supply chain and the region. So floor is yours, Kemal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, my dear brother Khan, my dear comrades, sisters and brothers. Thank you for this opportunity. Indeed, today we are really touching on a very critical issue. And I can tell you this, supply chains are critically important for manufacturing, for energy, for mining, the whole the chain internationally. And indeed, last year when we were in Glasgow, I can tell you that just transition has really fallen within the supply chains. And because this movement of just transition, we need to ensure that everyone benefits equally with economic terms, with social terms, with environmental terms. And from that point of view, I can tell you that last year when we had this debate, and it was critically stressed that supply chains are crucial piece for the whole puzzle of just transition. And this is why the United Nations are specifically committed to supporting all the international agencies in considering the wider environmental, health, social, and employment impacts of the operation of global supply chains. That also includes, I can tell you, the importance of building climate resilience into the supply chains across all the industries. And the supply chains are at the center of different debates. And the future of the economics of the world, future of the industry, the production of the world, and sustainability, and of course for the rights issues. At this point, if you allow me, then I just want to support what I am saying with the presentation so that we can have a look where we are, what we do, because I really want to put it in the context. It is important for all of us to understand where we are, what we are doing at the moment. As I already told you, my dear comrades, sisters and brothers, last year there was a very important declaration from a series of countries, particularly in Global North, supporting the conditions for a just transition internationally. And I can tell you that this was a very critical moment for the recognition of just transition. And that recognition was that the effects of the climate change disproportionately affect those in poverty and can exacerbate economic, gender, and other social inequalities, including those resulting from discriminatory policies. At that declaration, I can tell you, my dear comrades, there was a very clear reference to support for workers in the transition to new jobs that we yesterday discussed, support and promote social dialogue and stakeholder engagement. Again, in yesterday's session, there was a very strong part, and economic strategies and decent work, and one part was allocated to supply chains. That means when we do a just transition discussion, then it really brings supply chains into the heart of the debate that we are doing throughout the world. At that point, the recognition of the importance of supply chains is really important for all of us. And that declaration suggested that the supply chains must be transformed, must be functioning better, And it was an important reference for the first time in the debate in just transition. But as I already told you, Industrial Global Union, we already handle the supply chains in different angles. I just want to make a reference to the ILO guidelines on just transition. As you see, there is a big package of different policy lines here. The first part is macroeconomic and the growth policies. And the second part is industrial and sectorial policies. Particularly in these two parts, supply chains are the very critical elements to move forward. That means if we really want to talk about a true, genuine just transition, it requires to look at in detail, in a serious manner, about the situation of supply chains. As far as Industrial Global Union is concerned, it is an important matter of industrial policy. Our organization, we are very much proud that we already worked on the industrial policy, the matters in our regions, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Middle East and North Africa, in Latin America, in Asia Pacific, where there are production countries playing an important role in global supply chains. And I can tell you that no country, no region in the world has achieved prosperity and a decent standard of living for its citizens without a robust industrial sectors. So this is why the policymakers and civil society, we always repeat, emphasize of the importance of industrialization for all the countries. This is something quite important for us. And this is why at the heart of the policies of industrial policy is a very critical matter. It's a critical matter because particularly the countries in Global South, we need industrial policy in ecological transformation. And it really requires a big package, a set of policies. And also it needs to be linked with social upgrading. From that point of view, supply chains are really playing an important role. In our global union, we have two flagship campaigns, one in Africa, and we really want to have an industrialization in African continent that is overwhelmingly based on the minerals production, and it really needs to be scaled up. So this is why our global union in Israel, we are working very hard together with our affiliates in the region to really make industry as the main driver of the economies. That requires a strategy, a vision for mining industry. So my comrade Glenn Mpufane will later talk about this issue. And Diana Hunker, our Director for Energy, will be talking about the oil and gas. There are some countries like Mozambique, like Tanzania, they have just discovered oil and gas, but it has coincided with a time when the climate change discussions really dominated the whole world. And another important flagship campaign, as far as Industrial Global Union is concerned, is reindustrialization of Latin America. Now, with the election of President Lula, we have a huge chance to really transform again Latin America to an industrialized continent. I believe this is possible. And this is what Industrial Global Union is doing. And again, the discussion on supply chains, how this reconstruction and transformation will be done. From that point of view, it is a critical matter as far as we are concerned. Why supply chains are critical for Industrial Global Union, my dear comrades, sisters, and brothers. Industrial Global Union has a jurisdiction of a number of manufacturing sectors, and most of them are very much international. When we say international, we make a kind of comparison between the exports and the output. For example, for electronic sector, more than 80%, same machinery, same textile and garment, same automotive sector, extractive sectors, chemical sectors. This means whatever happens in the supply chains globally, that impacts all the sectors that Industrial Global Union represents. And if any change impacts the employment of our members on the ground, then we need to be able to have a say. So from that point of view, any discussion, any debate in relation to supply chains is a critical importance for Industrial Global Union. This is why we are putting the whole strategy on the supply chains in terms of economic modeling, in terms of social modeling, in terms of labor rights. And I can also tell you that now in the global governance system, there is a big discussion about international production. Indeed, there is technology, there is new industrial revolution, there are different policy lines, investment policies, trade policies impacting, and of course, sustainability, climate change are really impacting the production at international level. When we talk about international production, it directly refers to the supply chains. From that point of view, at this debate of just transition, it is critically important that we understand what is going on, and then we articulate our strategies out there. And perhaps one last slide here about this particular matter, putting it in a context. Now, in the global arena, there are different trajectories for the future of international production and the global supply chains. There is a big discussion about reshoring, particularly with the situation of supply chains. Then it was really discussed to get some of the investment back for making sure that the materials are provided in the countries as they are being done at the moment outside. For example, we had this situation with gloves, with masks, etc. So this is why this reshoring, diversification, regionalization, replication are different scenarios for the future of international the production and, in a way, global supply chains, global production chains. Okay, then what is the supply chain? Where are we right now? So, as we are talking about transformation, then we need to have a kind of picture where we are, what we need to transform, what we need to fix, what we need to improve. And it is obvious that now there is an unsustainable, abusive economic and business model everywhere. And I can tell you that right now we see in the global supply chains exploitative working conditions. Workers work long hours, even beyond legal limits, for poverty wages, without health and safety conditions. And this price pressure by main companies, brands, keep wages low, and while the real value really declines against inflationary increases at the moment. From that point of view, I can tell you this, my dear sisters and brothers, the model that has been developed by the current model over corporate social responsibility and social audits, compliance mechanisms, overwhelmingly voluntary without any obligation, then they are not working for fixing the problems in the global supply chains. So this is why we see less and less respect for workers' rights. And then we see less and less accountability. We see less and less the transparency. From that point of view, if we really need to take a picture of the global supply chains, indeed, we need accountability, that's for sure. We need traceability. We need to be able to know where the products are produced. And then we need to go beyond audits and we need the responsibility through binding regulations, which I will attach later on. And then we need to increase the scrutiny over the labor rights. Same for living wages that are quite behind the expectations. And also these precarious employment models. We say no to labor brokers. And then there is a huge reality of migration. And then we need to be able to prevent forced, illegally employed workers. And my comrade Glenn Mpufane will talk about social license to operate, managing the impact of commodity downtown. And we have a huge problem of gender parity, parental leave, discrimination, harassment, violence. And finally, we have issue of climate change. And then we need to be able to integrate the human rights into the adaptation and mitigation of climate change impacts. This is what we are discussing today. And my dear comrades, it was a couple of years ago, International Trade Union Confederation has made a study targeting 50 largest global corporations and brands and producing $3.4 trillion revenue per year, and looking at their employment composition in the whole supply chain. And the result is the following: only 6% of the workforce in the whole supply chains of these 50 largest brands and companies, and 94% is in supply chains. That means now, if we really want to address the problems of labor workers, we certainly need to address the problems in supply chain. This is a very important starting point as far as we are concerned. This is why, as the global unions, we have an agenda, and we setting this stage about this with the investment, production, trade policies. And we also look at the issues at the world of work, and also upgrading the decent work in global supply chains, and also creation of a good global governance in global supply chains in a way to avoid the governance deficit in the supply chains. At this point, I really want to come to the point of due diligence. And the due diligence is an important conception at the moment. And our global union industry, in our next executive committee, we will have a debate out there. So one part of our strategy is to create an enabling environment for due diligence. I already told you that we need to transform from voluntary to binding nature of the regulations in global supply chains. At this point, one important act goes through negotiations for a United Nations binding treaty on human and business rights. Actually, the last negotiations were held last week here in Geneva. As the union movement, we have put forward our demands. If there are questions later on, we can have a look at it. And another important dimension is directive of the European Union on mandatory due diligence. It is also very important. When and if this happens, then all the companies originating from the European Union will have responsibility to conduct due diligence, and this will be a legally binding instrument. And at this category, I can tell you, my dear sisters and brothers, now in individual countries, there are different legislations. One in Germany, actually in 2017, we had this legislation in France, and then now we have Norway, and quite a number of particularly European countries, they have a debate about how to enact legislations to increase supply chain responsibility. And I can report also to you that not just in Europe, but also recently Japanese government in cooperation with the unions, they have issued guidelines for supply chain responsibility. So this is now the trend. Another important arena where we work on supply chains is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And I can tell you that this is the most developed area for due diligence. And it really brings a good framing, good framework about the due diligence conception, and particularly in the sector that Industrial Global Union represent. And we have sector-wise due diligence guidances. One is related to mining, and this is an important 5-step framework. And we also have the same in the textile garment industry and also in the extractive industries. They are still voluntary, not binding, but important references for conducting due diligence in our sectors. ILO is an important area where we need to work. Actually, the expectation and the demand of the global union movement is that ILO is at the center of the global governance of global supply chains. Unfortunately, there is a big resistance from the employees, and the Congress Action Plan of Industry all demands a particular ILO convention on supply chains, but we still have a long way to go. And I can refer here to the Tripartite Declaration of Principles concerning multinational enterprises and social policy. And here, there is an emphasis that all the enterprises should carry out human rights due diligence with the meaningful consultation with relevant stakeholders, including workers' organizations. And second part of this strategy is operationalization of due diligence. And here we use different instruments. And the first instrument we are using is global framework agreements. And this is an important tool for due diligence. At this stage, we try to create a kind of environment whereby all the parties win-win. Here, not just own employees, but also the supply chain employees should be in the scope. And then we try to realize, conduct the due diligence out there. And here, we also bring together trade unions in newly developing sectors. Battery supply chain is one of them. This is an important from starting from mining and continuation with chemical processing sector and to end user like the automotive or electronic. Same in the renewable energy. It is now production of equipment and the installation of energy and production of energy and maintenance of energy. There is also a new area of organizing. Same supply chain strategy in the garment industry to be able to bring a social protection flow. And these are the new innovative approaches. Same tomorrow, you will be discussing this mobility sector issue. This is also an important supply chain. And there is a change in how we work together with our comrades in transport side, particularly to work together to look at it. So these are the new areas where Industrial is developing strategies for covering the supply chain workers out there. And in the meantime, we develop new initiatives, partnerships. And you already know this Bangladesh Accord. Now it has turned to be an international accord in the textile garment sector. And it really particularly focuses on health and safety. Same initiative in the same sector with the initiative called Act on Living Wages. So this means from different angles, we try to put our weight out there. And the similar thing with the multi-stakeholder initiatives. I presume Glenn will talk about initiative for responsible mining insurance and also a similar responsible steel. But I can tell you that these initiatives exist in most of our sectors, and we try to influence the governments as well as the employers for increasing supply chain responsibility. And one last thing I want to mention here, which is a developing area, that is the social investment. And at this point, the company's performances over environmental, social, and governance issues are closely followed. And it is not just for own employees, but also supply chain employees. And then it brings us new leverages in our actions, campaigns in the global supply chains. And now there is an important word. This is the third dimension of what I want to say. So what is this due diligence? And how we are going to increase awareness and build capacity in our trade unions. At this point, I can tell you that it is very important to understand the due diligence. Due diligence is not something out of trade unions. It is at the heart of the labor relations. And it starts identifying the risks and also adverse impacts. And also looking at the adverse impacts happened and the possible adverse impacts in the future, and bringing solutions to that process. This is a cycle that we need to know very well. At this point, what is due diligence exactly? Do the companies that they respect human rights, workers' rights? Or how do they know? How do they know? Are we going to just rely on what they are telling us? Or are we going to be involved in it? At this point, companies should engage with stakeholders, including trade unions, at all stages of due diligence, identifying impacts, assessing impacts, devising responses, identifying forms of remedy, and tracking and communication all the adverse impacts. At this point, my dear sisters and brothers, coming to the end of this presentation, and I can tell you that this notion of stakeholder engagement, that is the specific terminology of this area. And as far as labor is concerned, that is industrial relations. And from that point of view, collective agreements, global agreements, protocols, memorandum of understandings are at the head of the issue of due diligence. From that point of view now, the union movement has new opportunity, new leverage to be able to organize more workers, to be able to improve the working conditions through collective bargaining agreements. So this is why now at this point of transformation, we believe that this supply chain discussion in the context of just transition is critically important for all of us to understand and also to develop our trade union actions. So my dear brother Kan Matsuzaki-san, so this is what I wanted to present to the meeting. And I hope this is useful, at least the framing the discussion when it comes to these supply chains. And I'm very much looking forward to having a good debate with the questions, with the comments from the participants. Thank you very much. And over back to you, my dear brother.
Well, thank you very much, Kemal, for this comprehensive, the presentation and explanation on why this due diligence is important for this, supply chain, also to achieve our social dialogue on the just transition. We are covering quite many sectors. We have 14 industrial sectors from mobility, from aerospace, shipbuilding, base metal, chemical, energy mining, and so on. So this is very much cross relationship each other in the supply chain. So that's why we would like to secure due diligence process in our supply chain. And this is also related to the social dialogue with the government, social dialogue with the employer, to how we can achieve the proper just transition in your sectors and in your country. And Kemal also mentioned about the the possible tool in the future, UN binding treaty, and EU right now they are developing a mandatory due diligence legislation, and in some country they have already the tool of the tools, and we have global framework agreement. So we need to think about which tools and which occasion and what kind of situation we can use those due diligence tools to develop our social dialogue in for just transition. So thank you very much, for your comprehensive presentation, Kemal. But before we go into the next session, maybe we can take one or two question or comment from the floor if you have anything. So now floor is open for everybody. So if you have any question to Kemal or comment. Then if not, yes, I see the hand raised from Ortelio Palacio Cuesta. Please go ahead.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. I am Ortelio Palacio. I work in international relations for the National Federation of the Pneumatics and Rubber Industry in Brazil, and Brazil and Sintrabor. Thank you very much for the invitation. Yesterday, our president, Marcio Roveda, was participated in the opening, and today we have our brother here, Secretary General Vicente. I'd also like to congratulate Kemal, brother, for your excellent presentation. I would also like to thank the brothers at Industrial for all of the support and effective solidarity that was rendered during the victorious campaign by President Lula in Brazil. Has brought a lot of hope for the workers of Brazil, and in particularly for Industrial Brazil. Kimon's participation is very important because it synthesizes the concerns of the impacts that are foreseen in the new globalization world in which we live, and which is bringing deep changes, not only technologically, but also scientifically and in and changes that have to do with the world of work and climate change. This is a very important topic, and Sintrabor and Fenabor in Brazil are at your service, Brother Kimon, and Industrial, to continue strengthening this debate on these issues that have been presented here today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, brother, for your comment. I think this is a comment to support us to develop, this just transition discussion and our strategy in the future. So thank you very much for your comment, brother. So if there's any other comment, question, then otherwise we can move to the next session, then which is the key principle on the just transition in the industrial sectors. So today,
excuse me, I see one hand. Perhaps.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry about that. Yes, brother Mustaviet. Yeah, Butaye. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and I'll be speaking in French.
I'm going to be speaking in French. Thank you very much for our brothers for holding this Global Union meeting. I'm going to talk about power and the different sides of things, how things done now, because before this time, the main lever was strength from one side and the industry on the other side.
Excusez-moi, si vous parlez en français, vous pouvez changer de canal.
إذن سأتكلم باللغة العربية لكي لا أتأخر.
I will be switching into Arabic. Maybe it will make things easier. So I was talking about the power and counterpower. We are currently counterpowering at the union level through networking ourselves and advocating at the universal level. In the past, we used to work together as civil society organizations, trade unionists, and other stakeholders. But today we must be the pivots. We must be the center in order to be able to face what will be facing us. And to be the pivot, we need to arm ourselves with knowledge so that we can overcome the challenges. We need to have with us trade unionists, civil society organizations, human rights activists in order to have a true pressure, in order to have true power and strength. How can we transform the situation to our benefit? This is through knowledge, as I said, but also how can we do so within our trade unions at the national level so that we can bring together all of the efforts to be able to together overcome what is the transformations that will face us.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Butaya, for this question. Maybe I can give the floor to the Kemal for the response. Then,
Yeah, sure, my dear brother Kan Matsuzaki-san. Indeed, let me first thank Ortelio, Comrade Ortelio from Brazil. Thank you very much for the support. We really want to have you on board with this important journey. And regarding the question raised by Brother Butayib, indeed, in the region, Middle East and North Africa, we have already started to debate these industrial policy matters in our platforms. We have already discussed oil and gas industry and how the sustainability and just transition can be. And we have also done the same for textile and garment industry, for automotive industry. And now it is important to take this to the country level. And we have already started, even in Morocco, where you are based, my dear brother. And it is important that our affiliates representing industrial workers, mine workers, energy workers coming together and agreeing on industrialization, industry strategy. And along with this, it also requires an energy policy strategy, and also for mining industry that we will be discussing later on. From that point of view, now at global level, we do policy lines, and these are guiding principles in terms of content, in terms of methodology. We have taken them down to the regions. In sub-Saharan African part, I can tell you that so we have quite advanced in quite a number of countries. Even we are campaigning for the manifestos that we have jointly prepared and agreed with our affiliates in different countries as part of our Industrialize Africa campaign. And I believe we also need to make it quicker in Middle East and North Africa. From that point of view, Industrial Global Union is ready to provide you all the assistance as base for your deliberations and policy elaborations in your countries for industrial strategy, for energy strategy, and just transition strategy. And it is critically important. This is what I can tell you at this stage, particularly for the policy making side. And your global union has this capacity, has this knowledge, experience And this is why we organize these sessions, to increase awareness, to increase capacity, and also create and form a joint articulation and converting it to a trade union strategy with a proper action on the ground. This is the sequence that we need to put forward. I hope my words have at least partly responded the question that you have raised, but it is something important. We are waiting that kind of sensitivity and awareness from our affiliates. This is the raison d'etre of your global union, to give the policy impulses to the regions, to the countries, and this is one of our main functions. Over back to you, my dear brother Kan Matsuzaki-san.
Yes, thank you very much, Brother Kemal, for this response to Brother Buteyeb. I think that was the quite clear for him on what we are doing and for the national. I think the trade union, the cooperation, the network within the country is very key to solve this issue, I think. So let me move to the next session. Which will be, we will focusing on the key principle on the just transition in the industrial all sectors. So today we will focusing on the specific focus in mining and energy sectors. And we also a little bit touch upon these promises and reality after the Paris Agreement, the result from the last COP26. Then we will also focusing on the gender equality and just transition, how we can achieve this gender transformative and inclusive just transition in the future. So today we have three directors who will be present today, make a presentation and as a panelist. The Glenn Mfane, this is director for the mining. He will explain about the specific focus on the mining sector on the just transition. And Diana Hunkela Criel, she's the director of energy and also director for the just transition, who will explain about the just transition energy sectors and also a little bit touching upon this reality after the Paris Agreement from the COP26. Then we will have Ahmed Sebi, director for gender, who will present about this how we can mainstream in gender in this just transition discussion in the sector and supply chain. So first, I would like to invite the Glenn, the director of mining, for his input. So floor is yours, Glenn.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kansang, and greetings to colleagues, brothers and sisters from wherever you are. And thank you for joining the conversation, a very important one might add. And let me thank Comrade Kemal for that, for onboarding the conversation and for framing the parameters, of the debate, very important debate on just transition. And let me also thank Comrade, I think, Botayab for raising that very important question, which speaks to not the analysis, but the agency. What are we going to do about this? Part of the answer was given by, Comrade Kemal, and part of that answer is exactly what we are doing, but we need to go and look beyond just the conversation, but towards action, really. How do we change the world? What is the agency, So my presentation will be focused on the mining sector, but making those linkages with the supply chain, in terms of the auto sector in particular, and how we envisage the supply chain within Industrial Global Union. So let me share my slide. So I have been asked to speak on the reality and the need for a just transition in the mining sector. And I want to begin from where we left yesterday as the premise for my intervention. And I think the Paris Agreement is very clear in its articulation of the expectations on just transition and linking that to the intersectionality of other impacts, particularly human rights, gender equality, which we shall speak about, the right of indigenous people, particularly important in the mining sector, intergenerational concerns, which is, the impact of climate change is just not only now, it's intergenerational. And also, what action to take to address climate change in respect of a just transition of the workforce and creation of a decent work and quality. That is basically, our lodestar. Basically, that is our lodestar as trade unions. And of course, you cannot, divorce that from nationally defined development priorities. And this speaks to context, really national context. But industrial goes further and describes the objectives of a just transition as follows: to provide a hopeful and optimistic future for all workers, in particularly those industries that may be impacted by efforts to limit greenhouse gases or by the introduction of new technologies to limit greenhouse gas. And we heard yesterday about the carbon and capture storage as part of that. So it is about providing hope, essentially, and not only in the world of work, but in terms of the whole livelihoods. And livelihoods is about communities that are likely to be negatively affected. Those that are likely to be affected, alternative sources of livelihood should be provided with prior and mutual agreement with those to be affected. And this has particular resonance, if you like, with the mining sector in respect of communities around the mine, economic development around the mine, alternative jobs for those that would lose their jobs, as in the coal sector, for example. So all these things are connected. And what is the promise of Paris, of the Paris Agreement? And essentially, how do we compare when we map our experiences in the mining sector with the promise of, the Paris Agreement? Now, we've been talking about the green economy, rightly so, because that's the salvation, for humanity, the green economy. Now, the green economy, as it is, demands on its own is not going to happen, right? It is fueled by new metals, as in the critical raw materials. That's what fuels that. But in the process, it generated or has generated a super cycle, right? And this super cycle is basically what we call currently, and this is obscene, and that's the nature of capitalism, that on the backs of injustices, that is visited, if you like, on workers and communities, there is this super cycle, a commodities boom. If you look at the balance sheet of any mining company that is involved in this part of the supply chain, the profits are unimaginable. The mining industry is in the driving seat, period, right? And this is according to the International Council of Mining and Metals chief, Tom Butler, who said, the mining industry has created the problem, part of the problem, or made a contribution to the problem, and it offers a solution to the problem. But it must not be allowed to offer the solution on its own terms, which is what it is used to do. They are in the driving seat. but we want to be part of where this journey is going, where this trajectory is going. Now, according to the World Bank, the production of critical raw materials is estimated to increase by nearly 500% by 2050. To meet, so it's a supply and demand question, to meet the growing demand for clean energy technologies. Now, the question that we ask is, at what cost will the green economy be? Let's take battery production, which we are heavily involved with as industry world in the, not only in the auto sector, but across, the supply chain, as in your, energy storage, as in your, your EVs and so on and so on. Battery production will be one of the fastest growing industrial activities in the years to come. The extraction of cobalt, lithium, copper, and nickel is associated, and that's the experience, is associated with gross human and workers' rights violation and unacceptable environmental consequences. Not close to our conception of just transition. So this cannot happen, if we are, in search of, and these are the estimates in what I describe as something reminiscent of the arms race. It's basically a race, right? A race, supercharged race, and these figures are staggering. These are global mining project developments, from exploration, scoping, advancing, approval. This is the mining world, and it takes about 15 years or 10 years at minimum, right, to complete the cycle and have the mine, right? And if you talk about 13,000 mining projects, 1.18 trillion in total investment value. In Europe only, 73.7 billion, right? Which approximates only 6% of the global, of this project, if you like, and it's across Latin America, Africa, South Asia, Oceania, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, East Asia, Russia, Western Asia, Europe, Now, we had this from one of our webinars on the battery supply chain. The Euromines estimates that by the big push to 2030 will require this sort of magnitude of minerals: aluminum, copper, zinc, silicon, lithium, nickel, cobalt, dysprosium, neodymium, praseodymium, right? This is the Global Mining Outlook 2021, right? Now, what drives this? What is the driver behind this huge race, to meet demand? The EVs, one component of it, electrical vehicles, right? Global sales demand by 2030, 5.6%, right? But behind that, is the rush, the low carbon energy zero, the rush to zero emissions. Part of that is banning the sale, and we heard that from Samantha yesterday, banning the sale of new diesel and petrol cars by 2030, right? Canada, there's the target there by 2050, 30% penetration. France, to end ICE, internal combustion engine, 2040. Norway, Netherlands, Italy, Japan, China, India, and so on and so on. What is conspicuously absent from this graph is Africa. So immediately the imbalances, if you like, we say in just transition language, leave no one behind, right? This slide only tells you that a huge part of the global population in the South is going to be left behind. What is the cost of an unjust transition? And this is real. I had a global network meeting last week in the mining sector in the DRC. This is a report that basically nobody is sanitized, right? The road to ruin, electric vehicles, and workers' rights abuses at DRC Congo's industrial complex. And this is just a snapshot of what is going on around the world in those vulnerable parts of Latin America. And we've been dealing with stories around lithium in Chile, right? Now, workers' rights, the model in terms of subcontracting that provides cheap labor. There's no way that comes close to just transition, right? 26,455 workers are employed directly or indirectly at the mines in this research, and 57 of that is subcontractors. Evidence suggests that, and here we're not talking artisanal small-scale mining, we're talking about reputable mining companies, large-scale mining companies that are involved in producing this cobalt for their EVs, right? So this is the cost. Now, what is the response from the mining sector? That they want to seek better alignment with societal values and expectations. They have developed internal human rights standards, what Kemal was talking about. These are industry initiatives they're talking about. There are other initiatives that we are talking about, right, which are different to what they are talking about. We're talking about ERMA, right? We're talking about responsible steel, right? Those where we have a voice, where we can put on the table. Comrade Diana always says that if you are not at the table, you are on the menu, right? And these industry-led initiatives allows you, in fact, puts you on the menu when our initiatives puts us at the table, right? They want to determine what is responsible sourcing. And the industry, the auto industry, wants to determine what is responsible sourcing, right? And they've made public commitments to promote and protect the rights of their workers. All this comes down to what we call greenwashing, right? So this is spin, essentially. It's basically to retain the status quo while they make their profits and provide the minerals that the green economy needs. We are participants, Industrial Global Union, on the Committee on Workers' Capital, who have a vested interest in the debate. There was a project by the World Benchmarking Alliance, which basically benchmarks the performance of the supply chain, essentially, and of course the actors in the supply chain. The World Benchmark Alliance was undertaking this to map where companies are in terms of just transition. Now, what CWC said in terms of what they would like to see as questions being answered: one, draft indicator one. CWC wants a draft indicator that speaks to the fundamentals of a just transition plan. What are the fundamentals of a just transition plan? That is up top there. The just transition can be valuable if it clearly delineates which companies are upholding freedom of association, collective bargaining, and social dialogue, and which ones are not. Very practical. No pie in the sky abstract theories, concretely, which companies are doing ABC? That's one, draft indicator one. Draft indicator two, fundamentals of social dialogue and stakeholder, very key, critical to supply chain due diligence. Stakeholder engagement and social dialogue. Our experience in the mining industry. I was in a meeting last week, Latin America, Colombia. Nothing, they don't know what you're talking about stakeholders. What is that? What is the stakeholder engagement? What is social dialogue? We're actually taking up a case to the OECD NCP, national, the national contact point person on this question of social dialogue and stakeholder engagement about two major companies. Now, what the CW says that is that on this draft indicator, what they would like to see, what institutional arrangements are in place to facilitate social dialogue with social partners, participation of all at the international, national, regional sector, and local level in the building of an appropriate just transition policy framework. There, we want that question answered. That's CWC. Draft indicator 3, and this is not only in the mining sector, it's across sectors, by the way, across all the sectors that we organize. Draft indicator 3, green and decent jobs for an inclusive workforce. We want answers to that question. And this must align with global human rights framework and labor standards. The ILO just transition guidelines must be the authority on this. As I said, authoritative and global description of the just transition grounded in core labor and human rights. It cannot be clearer than that. You'll be surprised at the answers that the World Benchmark for Alliance came up with. These are the key findings in the Just Transition Assessment Report 2021. The question that they answer, are high emitting companies putting people at the heart of decarbonization? That is the question, right? Here is what they found to that question. The vast majority of high emitting companies fail to demonstrate efforts towards just transition. 2, people most at risk are being left out of decisions that affect their future. 3, companies must means they are not. If you say companies must, it means they are not committed to reskilling workers or risk a stranded workforce, stranded communities, or stranded assets. Businesses are not using their influence to protect people, manage social impacts, and advocate for a just transition. 5, a just transition needs to be underpinned by companies' respect for human rights. This is an indictment. This is as bad as it can get. This is as bad as it can get. Just transition and the urgent need to avoid community ghost towns. This is coal. Now, in terms of the supply chain, the coal that is being shipped in this energy crisis, we've seen the price of coal go skyrocket, right, into the stratosphere. Against this misery, this is South Africa, the Highveld in Carletonville. Those buyers, public utility, huge energy companies utilities, energy utilities that are members of Better Coal. We know Better Coal. Better Coal is another industry initiative that seeks to answer the questions that we are raising. If they could say, how is the coal that we are receiving from Colombia, from South Africa, from India, clean? What is clean coal? This is not clean. This is not. And where was just transition here, right? This is a ghost town. And a ghost town is defined, right, as a town. A town becomes a ghost town because the economic activity that supported it has failed or ended for any reason. Any reason includes the low carbon transition, where coals and Comrade Khan mentioned the quantum of the estimated job losses that would occur in the coal mining industry in terms of the IEA, right? And compound that loss with, this is what happens. This is the loss because it basically subjects communities. This was a once thriving, very active community. Number 2, in South Africa, And when I showed this slide to our colleagues in Colombia, and I said, this is what is going to happen if we don't do nothing, right? So the question to Peter Cole is that, do the right thing, demand from your coal people that export coal to Europe, you know, an end to this. Now, supply chain, the authority, UNGP, right? Everybody is accountable. The state, right, has a duty to protect. Business has a responsibility to respect. Victims must have access to remedy. What can we do? There it is, right? Now, in terms of our conceptualization of, and this is the project that we're involved in, supply chain human rights due diligence, we say that just transition or justice must be accompanied by the exercise of pressure to realize it. Nothing is going to happen if we don't do nothing, right? Human rights due diligence involves the actions taken by a company to both identify and act upon actual and potential human rights risk for workers. Not only in its operation, but also the supply chain and the services that it uses. So it brings into the equation, into the supply chain, everybody else, from the mining company to anybody that buys from the mining company, including the critical raw materials that we're speaking about, right? This is what everybody must do there. What we, in terms of our project, that justice must be accompanied by the exercise of pressure to realize it. Fair income, secure employment, safe working conditions, employment. Standards and rights at work, equal opportunities and equal treatment for all. Social protection for workers and their families. Proposal for personal development, social integrations. Workers are free to express their concerns and to organize. This is wall to wall, the whole ecosystem of the supply chain, right? As we head towards COP27, plus 230 organizations are asking a simple question of the COP27 leaders: to protect human rights and the planet in the scramble to extract transition. So it's almost a contradiction, right? Something bad is coming out of something good. We want this net zero, but how much are we prepared to sacrifice, right? It's like feeding the monster, you know, or the demon. So this is the message that colleagues I give, for Industry All, for part of when we go to COP27. And beyond that, what are we going to do beyond COP27? That is the question. And that is, the simple answer is that build trade union power across the supply chain, right? We always make this example of the auto sector, that the auto sector is the most developed, right? Not only in terms of technology know-how and the auto sector is very high up the global value chain. Similarly, trade unions are very well matured, very well organized. Compare that in the supply chain with the mining sector, which is in the global south in the main, highly immature, very weak, fragmented. And if we ask supply chain questions, the auto sector unions have a responsibility to make sure that they force companies down up the supply chain and down the supply chain to respect human rights and workers' rights. That is our theory of change. Thank you very much, Comrade Khan-san. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Brother Glenn. Thank you very much for your very specific, example on what is happening on the ground, especially in this mining site.
Yep.
And I think it struck me that the global mining project development 1.18 trillion in total investment value. So while we are struggling to the world to pay 100 billion for the mitigation for the damage and loss for the just transition, but the companies or the country is investing 1.18 trillion US dollar in total investment value. So I think this is a quite a contrast, why the country or the companies hesitating to pay only 100 billion US dollar for the just transition for the developing countries. So thank you very much. This very concrete example on the reality on the ground in the mining sector. So now I would like to move to energy sector. So I would like to invite Diana for focusing on the reality on the energy sectors. And also Diana is also attended last COP26 and will attend COP27 this year on behalf of Industrial Global Union. So floor is yours, Diana.
Thank you very much, Ken. Hi, everyone. I would like to share my screen, also a short presentation that I will talk about how the different situations are impacting now in the energy sector, but also in the energy workers, and the what happened last year in COP, since we have been hearing a bit about that, but also what we are planning for COP this year. Let me share the screen. Okay, it's coming. Yeah, should be there. Okay, there you go. Okay, so as you know, the situation in the energy sector changes every day, and also because due to the invasion of the Russian troops of Ukraine, sorry, and which is far from improving, continues to worsen. And this is also bringing a lot of instability in the sector, and as well as the entire economy as a whole. There are some concerns. One of the main ones is about the energy security, and also because here in the North Hemisphere we are facing the winter right now, and also because of the climate change, we are not sure about the type of winter that we are going to have. Could be a warmer winter, but could be also a much difficult winter, and energy security is one of the key issues that the governments are dealing with now. But also then the crisis in the prices, the energy prices, and how this is impacting everyone. I will speak now about it. But this crisis these energy prices are also bringing the inflation levels at an average of 10%, more or less, in many countries of the world. And this is making it very difficult for citizens and also for workers and for industries to cope with. Citizens, as I mentioned, have to choose sometimes if they pay the bills for the electricity or the gas, or if they can afford the food that they need to survive to this situation right now. But also this is difficult for the industries, and that some of them are facing their profits margins reduced, and some of them are also producing even at a loss. And in some sectors, as for example the steel or material sectors, that are one of the largest consumers of energy for the production of what they need, they have decided not to produce because of these high prices, and what they are doing is to stop the production, what is also impacting workers in these industries. And as I was mentioning, workers are paying twice for this. If we talk about the different trends and drivers of these change, there are two big ones. One are is the climate change, and I can bring you some figures regarding the energy sector and the impact on the climate change. The energy sector is one of the biggest sources of the greenhouse gas emissions. It's around 3/4 of the total emissions, but also worldwide, the oil and gas sector is around 45% of these emissions. Out of this total, 10% is coming from the operations of the oil and gas companies or industry, and from the energy that they purchase in order to go with to run their operations. And the 35% is coming from the combustion of these oil and gas products and the derivatives, also in other industries like chemical, for example. But also the energy transition and all the transformation that we are facing. Now what we can see is that more and more countries are embracing the energy transition from the fossil fuel based to zero carbon energy sector as part of their national strategies in order to reduce these CO2 emissions, but also limiting the global warming. And all this is backed by governments, employers, workers, investors of these companies, and also the consumers that they have also an important role. And these energy transition policies are starting to beginning to transform the broader energy sector, and as well as the oil and gas industry, as we were seeing before. And some of the main challenges and opportunities that we are facing in all this entire transformation regarding the energy sector are these. For example, one of them is the digitalization and Industry 4.0, and how this has an impact in workers, and regarding how the jobs are, the new jobs, how they are coming and how it looks like, but also the job creation and what is the new jobs that we are going to face in the future, the jobs that are going to be transformed, because some of the current jobs that we are having right now will be transformed to something different, but also some of them will be lost. So we need to know more about all this transformation, creation, the job losses. And for that, we will need as well the skills that are needed for that, the training and retraining for workers, and how this future works looks like, because what we are demanding are decent works, decent jobs with social protection, and as we have been listening from the beginning of the webinar, with us, the union representatives at the table, in order to be able to take our own decisions. And this is the situation when it's happening right now in the sector. Now I would like to go to, because the intervention was also about what happened since the Paris Agreement and in the conference of the parties. So I would like to mention what happened last year in COP26 that took place 1 year ago. And that one was an important COP, because it was 5 years after the Paris Agreement. So it's where all the governments should show what they have done or not done regarding their commitments to tackle the climate change and to reduce to 1.5 degrees the global warming and the emissions that they are facing, that they are emitting. This one, as I mentioned, was one of the important ones, because they produce the Paris Rule Book, that is where is content how the governments are going to define their national determined contributions to cut these emissions. And we managed to include there the just transition concept and definition that should be also part of all this transformation. Last year was a difficult year for COP, because we have two faces of the same coin. It was very positive and good for the rich and polluting countries because of I will show you now the agreement that they got, but also it was very difficult for the poor and vulnerable countries that are also already suffering the consequences of the climate change. And the key outcomes that came out from this from the last year was, one of them was the end of coal. Even though the biggest emitters as China or India managed to change the language, and it was in the agreement at the beginning it was said that it will phase out the coal, and they managed to soften the language and put it the phase down of coal. But something that was clear is the intention that there is no long-term future for coal, and it's something that they will have to work with, no matter the language that is written there. And the second one, the second outcome that was very important for us as workers and union representatives is the commitment on the just transition. It was a big strength on this commitment, as I mentioned in the Paris Rule Book, but also there was a just transition declaration that where we the unions we participated in this definition and not definition, sorry, in this declaration, and we managed to announce that that the rich countries will set important precedent in this transition for the sustainability must happen through the consultation with the most affected parts, that are workers and unions. So that was also an important achievement of this. And as Can was mentioning, we are already heading the COP27 that will start on next week on Monday. And yesterday, in the webinar that we organized about just transition in general, we had the participation of ITUC, where they explain our main demands for COP. We are coordinated by them, and this is what we can show you is what we are defending. And the key things are these 6 that you can see on the screen. Is about the implementation of these just transition plans for the workforce. We want a real just transition, not only in the papers, also in the reality. Also to guarantee the human rights and labor rights and an inclusive participation in all these discussions. Also to raise mitigation and ambition and creating quality jobs with this just transition that we are demanding, but also adaptation needs and social protection plans and funding for all these, proper social protection plans are needed to have this transition, but also proper fundings, because if there are no funds to make all this transition, it's going to be impossible to get along with it. Also to deliver on loss and damage facility. This is about the countries that are suffering right now the impact of the climate change, the ones that are facing the main challenges right now, because they need very specific actions and loss and damage facility for receiving the support as soon as possible. And also the last one is to provide the urgently need on climate finance to invest in just transition, because if we don't have finance, it's going to be very difficult to deliver all these commitments that we are planning. So this is all what I wanted to mention. I don't want to extend me more regarding the energy sector. So yeah, we are here in case you have any comments or consultation. We are very happy to respond you. So thank you very much, Can. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Diana, for your comprehensive explanation on showing the reality on the ground, and also the main discussion in the COP. It is very much clear that all of us, aware, recognized that we need to phase out from this fossil fuel, from coal, from oil, from gas, and it is already happening. Then, as Diana mentions, that we need to really concentrate it on our challenges and opportunities. There will be opportunity, but how we can get this opportunity for the green and decent, and also the unionized job. So I think this is our challenges, and also social protection while the workers are experiencing the transition. So how we can secure the finance for the social protection. I think this will be also the key especially in our sectors, in energy sectors, mining sectors, and also the vulnerable country that Glenn and Diana mentions. So thank you very much for these the concrete and comprehensive presentation from mining and also energy sectors. So before I go to Amer for gender perspective, since it is already 2:30 p.m., maybe what I would suggest is that we will take some the question and comment from the floor for Glenn and Diana. Then we will take a 20 minutes break. Then after the break, then we will come back to this session with Amel, focusing on this gender perspective. Is that okay, Amel? Good. So before we take a coffee break, so I would like to open floor to everybody for your question. Yes, Brother Robbie, floor is yours.
Thank you, Brother Khan. Also, my apologies once again for my voice. Special greetings to
you are muted, Robbie. You are muted.
Okay. You hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay. My first question is for Glenn, and I want to use one of the quotes he posted, and that's about to protect human rights in the scramble to extract transition materials. And my remark there is that this will cause a influx of multinationals within countries that possess these materials. And my question is that what should be our demands and what should be our position with regards to the contracts that are signed between these multinationals and the several governments. I guess in my country, these big multinationals, yes, in mining, their operations are based on agreement between the government and the multinationals. And what happens, because these multinationals of these agreements are so weak, especially to labor and human rights, that, for example, when these companies leave the country, then the whole burden, falls on the shoulder of the unions in terms of negotiating leave benefits, yes, negotiating social protection, pension rights, and so on. Because there are no provisions within the agreements on labor. There are also other aspects like environment and so on, where that lacks in the agreement. And but that's for maybe another that's another issue. But regarding labor rights, there are no provisions. Yes. The question is, what can we demand in these terms as with regards to these agreements? I guess in a lot of countries it's just the same. We have experience here, my country, Suriname, also these ghost town effects. We have 3 ghost towns left behind from the aluminum and bauxite industry. So that should be a learning process for us. So what can we demand directly from governments with regards to the agreement with multinational company? Another question, I raised it yesterday also. It's with regards to because I raised it also, but I didn't get a satisfying answer. Training. I don't see clear demands on training of workers within the transition process, because that's very fundamental. Reskilling, retraining of workers within the transition process. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Robbie. So maybe the first question goes to Glenn, which is the multinational company and also the government, the agreement regarding this mining site. I think this also relate to the question on our campaign on the Glencore, I guess. So floor is yours, Glenn.
Thanks, Comrade Robbie. I think your question speaks to the power dynamic, essentially, and that power reflects in many ways. You're aware that, and Comrade Kemal spoke about the international treaty, binding treaty that we're trying to push, as a counter to what already exists for companies, that there is the International Court of Arbitration, where mining companies, and they've used that, where mining companies can take governments to arbitration, right? If they're unhappy about anything that threatens their interests or their investments. It's there, right? So that's the power dynamic that mining companies have. Institutionalized, by the way, okay? But then your question about what can we do, right? If you look at safeguards, basically, one is what are the safeguards, that accrue to trade unions in respect of the questions that you ask, and added to the safeguards is the social license to operate that Comrade Kemal spoke about, which is one of the key investment considerations. Firstly, you need you cannot in the mining sector talk in terms of unions separate from civil society. You cannot, because the social, it's building a if you like, I wouldn't say a movement, but a counterpower that can make these demands that you're talking about. One of them is the EI. It speaks to transparency. how transparent are these negotiations to the extent that the question is, what is the economic contribution that will be made to the host country in respect of A, B, C, and D, and so on, and so on, and so on. You know, so one, it speaks to building power for accountability, okay? And there are a lot of instruments that can help us in that effort, you know. And one of them is what, you know, Comrade Kemal spoke about, you know, in terms of the expectations. This is a supply chain question. Expectations that mandatory due diligence in Europe have with regards to different questions, and that could be one of the questions, you know, to the extent that a trade falls within that. So it is not, you cannot take a short-term a view on this. You know, I think you've got to take the big picture, not at what are the linkages. If it's company A, what is company A doing different in your country than it is doing in another country? And you may find that the question to your answer resides in exactly that answer being answered in another country. So this is the DNA of mining companies, that you cannot expect a neatly packaged answer, you see. And one other thing is to learn from each other. And that is the power of the networks, you know. Our struggles are global struggles. I mean, your question around training, for instance, there are examples in just transition agreements that have been negotiated in Spain, for instance. You know, it's being held as one of the most progressive in South Africa right now. There is that effort, you know, to stitch together a just transition framework agreement that answers those questions that you raise. You know. So when you look at the mining sector, the mining sector is about power. It's about bribery. It's about you know, and so on and so on. And that goes to the heart of why the supply chain question is so critical, because then it brings complementary power from the other sectors that we can begin to demand answers to those questions. You know, yeah. Thanks, Robbie, for the question.
Yes. Thank you very much, Brother Glenn, for this response. For the second question, Brother Robbie, on the training, on the clear demand from the workers, I think the union and the worker themselves should understand where they are right now in the process of just transition. So as yesterday, we actually mentioned about this trade union guide or practice for the just transition, which we recently released. I think that will help you to recognize, you know, how the information, what kind of information you will need in order to begin the process of the just transition. Then I think you will know how the union and the workers make clear demand for the reskilling or the skill training needs for the future. So if there's no other comment and question, then I would like to take 20 minutes coffee break. Is that okay for everybody? Okay, so Yanile, could you put 20 minutes timer? Yes, thank you very much. So we'll take a 20 minutes coffee break right now. And then after come back the coffee break, then we will begin with the AML's, the gender aspect on the just transition. Thank you very much. So stay online. Thank you. So welcome back to this webinar. I hope everybody had nice coffee and tea break. So let's continue this session. As maybe you know that Industrial Global Union, together with other global union federations, we have been working quite hard to put gender equality at the center of discussion on the just transition. So this is kind of mainstreaming gender equality in the just transition discussion is quite important for both for the sectors and for also in the regions. So I now give a floor to Amel, who is the director for gender, for her presentation. So floor is yours, Amel.
For giving me this opportunity to talk in this webinar and actually put gender equality on the agenda on the work of just transition. So let me share my screen. Okay. So that I will present briefly some slides. I hope you can all see them now. So starting by the call that global unions are making on for gender transformative and inclusive just transition. So this call actually is in line with ILO approach to this, as gender actually is one of the 7 guiding principles in the ILO just transition guidelines. So you can read that, I mean, in the guidelines, that policies and programs need to take into account the strong gender dimension of many environmental challenges and opportunities. Specific gender policies should be considered in order to ensure equitable outcomes. And actually subsequent work of on the ILO on just transition emphasizes on the transformative role that a just transition with inclusive climate action can play in transforming gender norms and furthering gender equality, including in the world of work, while ensuring women have the opportunity to participate as actors, including at the decision-making and leadership level, in combating climate change and spurring green growth. And also to mention that in the Paris Agreement, there is a call for gender responsive adaptation action. So before to go into detail on what does that imply to develop a gender transformative and inclusive just transition, I would like to illustrate why is it actually quite urgent to put gender equality in the work we are conducting on just transition. So we will give to that if it's not correctly conducted with appropriate gender approach, may enhance the gender-based inequalities in our societies, and more particularly in the world of work. So women already face significant obstacles in gaining access to employment and decent work. So let me just mention several figures here that are really quite illustrative. First of all, women still perform 76% of the unpaid care work, including childcare or care for elder people. The women earn globally 77% of what men earns. And according to the United Nations, 1 out of 3 women will face violence and harassment in her life. And this would include in the world of work. So these figures illustrate very well all the challenges that women can face, and discrimination and social and cultural barriers, sectoral and occupational job segregation. And we are also, women are also facing the undervaluing of their work. So all these challenges make women more vulnerable when it comes to the impact of climate change. And it is why actually it is very important that we would address gender integrate gender in our work on gender equality. I would like also to continue and mention that actually this job segregation can really drive to increasing gender equality in the future of work for women. I would like here to take the example of renewables. So if you look at recent figures and estimation, the share of women in renewable energy workforce is around 30%. Higher than the 22% average of women in the workforce in the global oil and gas industry. But when you look more carefully on where the women are in this renewable energy, we feel that we see that actually the science, technology, and sorry, I forgot to.
I think we lost Amel. Please wait for a moment.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we lost about I don't know 5-6 seconds. So could you just go
apologies
back?
because my network gets some problems sometimes. Yeah, so just to come back to what I was telling, that science, technology, engineering, and mathematics skills are what we are calling STEM skills, are critical to many career paths in the renewable energy sector. And however, because of the prevailing perception on gender roles, but also discrimination, gender pay gap, and unfortunately discrimination and gender-based violence, women are actually continue to have a very limited presence in these fields. And if you look at closer to the figures, you will see that in renewables, women's participation is much lower in these STEM jobs than in administration. So
I think we lost again. Please wait a moment.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, we
really
lost again for just 10 seconds. So
okay,
you just
so
go back
just
10
to say,
seconds. Yeah.
I would like to come back to just my sentence, which is that now even in renewable energy, maybe I will take away my camera so that there will be less cut. Yeah, so in renewable sector, women are much more represented in administration jobs than in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics jobs. So there is still, even in this sector, gender-based job segregation. So when it comes to the just transition processes that we are conducting, that have been conducted so far, we see actually that the gender equality is very often absent from many government just transition plans, and it is also missing from the agenda of many trade unions. So it's why it's that urgent also to call to integrate gender in this negotiation. And when you look actually, many times women remained underrepresented, if not excluded, from the negotiation tables of just transition plans and agreement. And furthermore, what we see is that the focus of most of our efforts on just transition and the government efforts on just transition has been focusing on energy transition, particularly in the phase out of fossil fuels. And in most countries, trade unions focus in negotiating transition for affected workers to new and decent jobs, and also to negotiate enhanced protection, such as a bridge to pension for older workers or additional. So while actually for trade union to get decent and unionized jobs in response of the job losses is really crucial, it it is not sufficient. It's not sufficient because it will not enable trade unions to bring to gender equality. Because if you look at the workforce of mining, energy, and very often carbon emitting manufacturing industries, actually men hold the overwhelming majority of formal jobs in mining. So a narrow approach of this transition that will focus only on the replacement of job for the existing workforce will leave behind not only women workers, but a lot of women from the affected communities. So it is why trade unions would need to really broaden their approach to just transition, and to ensure actually that just transition policies or agreements that are negotiated will guarantee equal opportunities for both men and women by addressing existing gender equalities in the future of work. So I don't know, So part of it also includes to develop an inclusive approach to skilling and training programs. So we've already seen how important it will be reskilling and training programs will be to get to a just transition. We need to take into account that actually women, due to lack of time, are very often excluded or underrepresented in training and skilling programs. So should really push companies to develop gender inclusive reskilling and training programs that are really conducted, for example, during working hours, and to which women will be able to accede. And one again, and this was discussed actually in our women's committee, industrial women's committee last week, and in the Women in Mining network that we had in June, we come to the conclusion that focusing on reskilling and retraining training programs, although this is crucial, is also not sufficient, because the women who are disproportionately represented in low-skilled trades in male-dominated sectors like catering, janitorial, will be left behind with these programs. And the same goes for healthcare workers or social or service workers in the affected communities. So funds should be available to design apprenticeship programs for women and groups who are facing in these communities. Another important aspect is to put care at the center of the negotiation on just transition. So already studies have been conducted, and I was quite impressed by a presentation from a sister from a trade union in Canada who went to visit communities where mine work sites have closed. And what was stressed by this presentation was the fact that actually in many of these communities where, for example, which are developed around a mine, production site, mine, or even energy, what they found, the ongoing delivery and maintenance of social infrastructure and services have been developed either directly by the mining or oil and gas, and or via tax transfers to local governments. So in these mining communities, the closure of these facilities means a loss of access to health, education, and childcare services that will actually disproportionately impact women who are already shouldering the major importance of well-funded programs for social infrastructure, ensuring the creation of also care jobs and really good care services in these communities. Let me also mention, before to go to the next slide, the problem of violence. So in communities where the mines have been closed or the central work site, actually there've been increased tension in the families, and the rate of domestic violence has raised. So it is also very important to get really good social services. So what does that mean actually to have a transformative just transition? A transformative approach means actually to tackle the root causes of gender inequalities. So this transformative just transition would imply to have adequate and increased investment in just transitions toward a gender responsive, inclusive, green, and caring economy. This will also require to guarantee to provide decent work for all, of informal work, because women are disproportionately represented in informal economy, and also universal access to social protection. It also implies universal access to public quality care, health and education services. And very important is also, it also implies to overcome gender-based sectoral and realizing equal pay for job of equal value. So my penultimate slide, and I will go quickly, is what should trade union demand? So coming to the question of the brother earlier on what should trade union demands. And I think when it comes to make sure that the agreements that will be negotiated with companies or policy negotiated with government, it is very important to make sure that they would negotiate for sustainable and gender responsive industrial policies aiming at creating decent work and guaranteeing equal opportunities for both men and women, and make sure also that, well, actually companies are working on their just transition plans. So it's important also to get gender gated data. So in terms of job loss and job creation, how will this impact differently men and women workers, and how to make sure that there will be gender balance in the creation and the attribution of the new jobs. So women in mining network were calling actually for quotas to be established when new jobs are created, and also quotas to be established in reskilling and retraining programs to ensure gender balance in the participation of these projects and programs. One aspect that we have not touched upon because we had no time, but it's also that unions should make sure that they must meet women's need in addressing gender inequality through to negotiate. And to come to my very last slides, it goes back to what Glenn was mentioning earlier, because negotiating just transition and actually the trade union's capacity to influence just transition has to do with how they organize members and how they build solidarity among members, as well as with the communities. So more inclusive, diverse, and make sure to include women, young workers in order to build power and to gain leverage for negotiated just transition, the responsive just transition. And there is also the issue of building alliances with feminists, rights, communities, and ecological organizations. But it's not only to build these alliances, it's also to go further and make sure that we are actually integrating all the community issues in our negotiation, and not as side items, but really as a core items in our agenda. So I was a bit long, so I will stop here. I hope that I was able to, it was not too much cut. So if there is any questions, yeah, let me know.
Yes, thank you very much, Mel. I think you have covered quite good core element of the gender aspect into this why the gender mainstreaming gender is important in the process of just transition. Especially you mentioned about this, renewable energy, which is a growing sector, but still limitation of the presence of the woman in those sector also. So what we need is, I think the keyword is equal access, equal opportunity for the women as the men do. So how we can reskill and training, and how we can give the equal access, equal opportunity for the all gender for this just transition processes. So I think that would be very important point. I would like to now open the floor to everybody. So if you have a question to the Mel, or if you have a concrete example of the issue and challenges that women is facing in the just transition process, that would be very, very appreciated if you have such kind of a concrete example in your union or in your country. So I open floor to everyone. I guess there's no, oh yes, please go ahead, Shahinul Rahman.
Okay, thank you. This is Shahinur Rahman from Bangladesh. So I'm working with Mondial FNB as a country consultant. I would like to share the situation here in Bangladesh. You know, the Bangladesh is one of the climate vulnerable countries in the world, and recently we also saw that so much frequently different natural disaster, like in the southern belt there are frequent cyclone, and in the northern part there are flooding and others. And when we see this all of this climate change effect, the women are mostly affected, because they have to really do all of their household works, but when due to this different climate effect, so all house destroyed, so they have to take care all of their household work. And for that reasons, there are so many internal migration happen that also affect the women and young girls, and also the older people. And when they come in the industrial area, and due to this technology improvement, due to this climate change effect, the industrialists and the factories, they are really improving the technology. And that's why the women, when they migrated to the urban area, and due to this climate change issue, the technology improved, and it reduced also the job opportunity for the women. So especially in the Bangladesh, if we look this, as for example, the R&D sector, so women are really day by day losing their jobs. And now this ratio of the male and female workers in R&D really reduced a lot. And now it's said that less than 60% are women, where earlier it was more than 60%, 80%. So it is very clear proven example from Bangladesh. The women really, they are losing their job due to this climate change, as well as this technology improvement. So we should, but unfortunately still this is not yet a priority of the trade union as well as the worker rights organization here in Bangladesh. So I think from the global union perspective, will take good intervention initiative for the knowledge development and skill development of the trade union workers and the activists here in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, brother, for this, explanation on what is happening on the ground in Bangladesh. I think not only Bangladesh, there's many such same cases in the vulnerable country in the same region, like in Pakistan or other area. I remember that Pakistan has heavily hit by this flood, deadly flood, so millions of people actually lost their home. But anyway, Amel, do you have any response to that comment?
Yeah, just let me just react quickly, but thank you very much, Shahinur, for this comment. I think what you raised also is very important, is the fact that in garment sectors, when there is an increase in an improvement in technologies, women are replaced by men workers. And this is very important, that in garment sector, we should really also take this into account and make also the brands accountable for this, and making sure that in the supply chain, they should ensure that the penetration of new technologies will not imply and will not how do you say, generate a job loss for women, because this is actually an unfair and unjust transition. So it's really very important. We are not talking very much or very often about garment sector and just transition, and I think this is also an important aspect to take into account in our future negotiation and discussion with brands. So thank you very much, Shahinur, for sharing this case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Amer, for this response. So if there's no other question and comment, then we will move to our next session. Okay, so it seems like there's no additional comment and question. So thank you very much, Amer, for your contribution for this session. So now we would like to move on to our next session, which is a specific focus on Middle East and North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. As I already explained to you, the COP27 this time is called, how do you say, the nicknamed as Africa's COP. Then I think you already aware that the next COP next year, COP28, next year will be in UAE, which is also in this MENA region, and this oil and gas country region. So during these 2 years, it's actually the COP is actually focusing on this MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa region. So this is why we pick up, this important region for this, webinar. So maybe I will invite Tendai first, Tendai Makanuza, the regional officer for Sub-Saharan Africa, for, how do you say, explain about the current landscape on the Sub-Saharan Africa, and also what is the workers' union need for the just transition in the future discussion in order to create our union strategy in the future. So can I ask Tendai to give us a presentation? Well, Tendai is here, right? Let me check.
Hello, Khan. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry my network was not great for the last minute. I'm going to try and screen share, and let's see if it works. Please hold on for me.
Okay.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us time and space for which to share our experiences in terms of the state of transition within our sectors. Primarily, I think we looked at the main extractive sectors, which is the mining and energy. I think this is because mainly the other industrial sectors such as manufacturing are far less in terms of proportion compared to these two. And we'll primarily also focus on the energy work because the regional office is focusing on that. But then to also say what are the possible COP demands that are coming from our region, and then also what would be the workers' needs. I think it's important for me to mention that my presentation doesn't primarily just come from the perspective of just the staff in the regional office, but it comes from a lot of consultative and processes with our affiliates in Sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of spaces that we've created and engagement platforms that we've heard with progressive organizations and individuals, members of the academia that have supported our work on transition. So what is the landscape and what are the strategic issues that are of primary concern or priority for our region? I think I'd like to thank kind of Glenn because he gave a synopsis of part of our region, and Diana and Amel kind of spoke to the key global issues. So I won't go into that because they gave fantastic statistics. But I think the starting point is that if you are in our region, the conversation begins by saying, while 17% of the global population does reside in Sub-Saharan Africa, we are responsible for less than 4% of the global emissions. And that, however, we are not saying that we should not have a transition in place, but we are also acknowledging that even as we craft our development path, it should not be devastating. And therefore, we must draw lessons from the path that a lot of developed countries took. But that we must not forget that this is also what drives the demands of the region. The second thing that we've realized in the discourse on transition is the reference to Sub-Saharan Africa as if it were a country and treating it as if it is homogeneous. So it's either Sub-Sahara plus South Africa, or when you talk to the energy sector, it's Sub-Sahara plus Eskom. And I think the region is saying, no, we do have sub-regions in Sub-Saharan Africa, and that we are not homogeneous, and that our needs and the transition is very varied, and that is key in terms of defining what would be a just transition for the region, whether it is the energy sector or whether it's the mining sector. The third context for us is understanding in a typical Sub-Saharan African economy that it is not primarily formal. We have a significant, almost 60 to 90% of the economies of Sub-Saharan Africa is informal. And that unfortunately the current discourse focuses on the formal sector and therefore may not address the issues of the majority that are found in the informal economy and or in the rural areas. One other landscape issue for us, or strategic issue, and I think Glenn spoke about it and I won't go into detail, is our concern about the resourcing of the transition. That when transition is being discussed at the global level and when people push and advance renewable technologies, whether it's for energy or the auto sector, they seem to forget the sources of the resources and what is happening there. And I think Glenn gave an example of what's happening with cobalt in the DRC, lithium in Zimbabwe, and when you look at these countries, and later on we'll speak about governance, is that there is a lot of human rights violations, not just by private sector, but by the government itself, and nobody's questioning the source of these minerals. So we have to question the value chain of how we are resourcing transition at the global level. And I think the last strategic issue for us is the concern about green capitalism, which is tricking, just ticking the box. Are we saying the right rhetoric? Are we speaking about going green and focusing on the E? And I'll speak about that a little bit when I speak about ESG. And I think this is the concern, that the conversation often does not speak to the history of the region. When it comes to neoliberalism policies, when it comes to past colonialism, not to take void around issues of corruption and governance that still exist in the region, but saying that we cannot ignore this past history. If we need to also say what is a just transition, we need to acknowledge that we are not starting from the same point when you come to the global south versus the global north. Now, what are our expectations or positions generally for trade unions in our region for COP27? I think first is the need to have the NDCs include not just the term just transition, but to define it. And I think one of the main challenges that happened in the pre-COP meetings in Bonn in June was that there was a lack of clear definition of just transition at the national level. And that for governments that had used the terms, they had not provided a definition, and that there had not been any consultation with non-state actors in defining this. And I think the concern from our region is that the devil is in the details. So not only do we want to see the inclusion of the words in the NDCs, but we also need to see a definition that also comes from an organic process at the national level that is participatory and inclusive in defining it. We are also calling for alternative just transition frameworks. I think we have already discussed that we're not homogeneous. We do accept that these definitions will differ from country to country within our own region, or maybe if we are lucky, we can have sub-regional definitions within sub-Saharan Africa. But there seems to be general consensus of what these alternatives framework must speak to. One, we do acknowledge and are pushing for a public approach in terms of provision, for example, of energy or renewable technologies or green technologies. But we also want at the center of the transition, the definition of the role of the state, which speaks to security and governance. And what is interesting is the venue this year of the COP27, which is Egypt itself. And therefore, the connotation is that whilst we push for a public approach, where we may differ with the global north is that in sub-Saharan Africa, we have serious challenges and contestations around governance and the violation of human rights and corruptions, and being unable to always hold our governments accountable to the public, and the definition of who's public. Is it the government or is it the people, and how do people influence a public approach? We also expect it to have a strong focus on poverty reduction, whether it's in the energy or the mining sector. And again, we speak to the reduction or support or conversion of the informal economy, but also addressing other primary issues such as free, prior, informed consent in the mining sector, addressing issues of access and transferability of renewable or green technologies, especially those that are manufactured and made from resources that are coming from our region. And I think one issue that comes out quite clearly from all the speakers that spoke before me is the issues around standards. Some of them, for example, being the due diligence standards. We have the EMA standards in mining, and the need for trade unions to understand that these are not isolated, and that we need to begin to build synergies around all this collective work and standards that we're pushing, and the role they will play in making sure that we create and facilitate or influence a just transition. There is no doubt that we call for decent employment creation that is sustainable. We also are demanding for realistic timeframes of transition, especially when you look at coal. I think Diana spoke a little bit about the current war in Ukraine with Russia. And I think it tests the realities of transition from coal, how sustainable the mechanisms really are. And whilst of interest, the global north is kind of worried that winter is coming. For us, it's already about access. There is an existing energy poverty gap that is already there that we need to address. And we need to start from that benchmark, which differentiates the global north and the global south. The third issue is around loss and damages, compensation, but also financing the transition. And I'll speak just generally and not in detail, giving an example of the Green Deal that was signed with South Africa and questioning it. African countries have noted that we need 700 billion US dollars for climate financing, even though we contribute 4% of carbon emissions. And the issue is that we are not asking it only in the forms of loans. We are also contesting the issues around debt cancellation, issues around unearthing illicit financial flows. I think these are campaigns and agendas that the non-state actors have been driving for several decades. And we also need to reintroduce them on the agenda as an option to financing sustainably the transition for Africa. And therefore also that we need to balance getting the support for loss and damage vis-a-vis what would be a new development agenda for the global South, where the South itself does not get conditionalities with the loans and aid, but is able to say, this is our transition path, and this is how, we want to mitigate, adapt, and change, and transcend from A to B, and this is how we'll finance it sustainably. We are also demanding issues around establishing comprehensive and effective social protection and security frameworks. If there's anything our region has learned from the COVID pandemic itself, is the devastating impact that it has had on a lot of the population within our region. And I think if you compare the global North and South, there is a phenomenon of what we call the missing middle, that you are either rich or poor, and there's no in between. And therefore, when you establish social protection, the approach should be different. Thank you, Amel, for raising the issues around gender equality and equity. I think the discussion in our region and concern is that we are not opposed to having sections, special sections that deal with gender equality and equity, but that we need to speak first and foremost very openly about women empowerment, and that not only should we have that section, but we should integrate it. So for instance, our expectation as a region was when Glenn was talking, when Kimau was talking, when Diana were talking, they should have also spoken about gender equality and equity and women empowerment very specifically. I think there's a lack of doing that in the current COP text that is there. And rather the focus is creating a separate section that is supposed to deal with that. And therefore the demand is very clear. We need to get clear targets on gender equality and equity and women empowerment across all the sections that are presented in the COP statements and agreements and negotiations. The last expectations is around ESG, which is the environment, social, and governance issues. This has been quite prominent in the mining sector, but I think there is consensus and agreement, even by mining companies, that the focus has been on the E and much less on the S and G. And that when you come to our region, you cannot just focus on emissions and reductions and commitments on that without having commitments on societal and governance related issues. Very quickly, if you allow me, brothers and sisters, is what are the workers' needs for supporting trade unions in our region to effectively influence for just transition? I think someone asked the question about capacity development. That actually is priority for us. Creating learning spheres, whether it's through social dialogue platforms, having policy advocacy and engagement initiatives for trade unions to understand the issues. The discussions for those that have ever participated in the COP process sometimes tend to be exclusionary in terms of their complexities. And trade unions took a very long time to engage on climate issues, and therefore building their capacities to technically engage with the issues, to define a just transition that advances a labor interest framework is very important. Whether we do this through sectoral networks, like in industrial, we do have sector networks, which we hope will take a clear agenda on transition issues, and also the formation of labor-based think tanks within industrial itself that bring various stakeholders to support it, whether to support and work with us, civil society, members of the academia, so that we can articulate the issues and our interests. I'm very happy, Khan, that you spoke about the kit in our region. We recognize it. We are just trying to disseminate it as part of our strategy on influencing a just transition. We are also now beginning to take a research. We're working with the director on mining in Geneva to actually also now do how we can influence for a just transition in the mining sector. So building our own information research capacity is very instrumental. We also have, we are speaking about building capacity for policy advocacy, developing policy positions and concrete demands, I think has been very key. A lot of the discourse, unfortunately, in our region is either say, oh, we don't like capitalism, we don't like neoliberalism, but we're not proposing a framework that says this is what would discourage capitalism, this is what would discourage or address neoliberalism, and we need to do that. Advancing the due diligence framework, I think this was spoken very much by Glenn and Kemal. Understanding and enhancing social dialogue and understanding on global framework agreements, especially in the energy and mining sector. The mining sector, we don't have global framework agreements. I think to keep pushing for them, although we do have a start that we have memorandum of agreements or understanding, but having these is very important to enhance social dialogue and creating social dialogue platforms at the workplace for trade unions to participate, not only to advance their rights, especially in collective bargaining, but also to influence the change of practices and policies related to transition, especially in the energy and the mining sector. And also, I think for our region, what our affiliates are asking us to do is to provide them support to develop union level responses to addressing climate change, to understanding just transition and influencing just transition at the national level, to understand things like NDCs and how they can become key stakeholders, greening themselves as organizations, building themselves as resilient institutions as well, but also strengthening community outreach programs so that we find strength in the grassroots movement, especially in our region, where the vast majority are found in the informal economy and outside our spaces as trade unions. The last thing that I want to raise is that in our region, we've been very frank that building South-South solidarity is very important. It's a lot easier because the challenges are similar, but that within industrial ourselves, we also have to be more open, that it's within some issues, we do have a difference with the northern-based industrial affiliates as those from those based in the global South. And that we must be realistic about these and identify where we have synergies and where we have differences. But then how do we use these platforms to address the interests of workers in the global South? Thank you very much. This ends my submission.
Yes, thank you very much, Sister Tendai. I think this was very comprehensive and concrete on this landscape of this sub-Saharan Africa region. And we all take note that this, very concrete, the demand from our affiliate, on this, from this region. Concerning this green capitalism, this is the, we cannot repeat again, this negative side of capitalism through the green revolution. So I think we need to be very careful that, the trade union, the workers' voice is always reflected to this green revolution when it comes to a just transition. And also the supporting affiliate, yes, this is our job actually. So union level responses to addressing climate change. So next year, Industrial Labour Union is also concentrated on the activity to supporting the concrete, the country, concrete region. That is for the next year activity. And South-South solidarity, North-South solidarity, this is very important because each country, each union has in the different level in the just transition processes. In some countries, it's quite advanced in the social dialogue with their employer and the government, and they are already get involved in the full process of the just transition. But on the other hand, many countries are still facing this difficulty on creating the platform of the social dialogue. So I think this kind of solidarity network will be also needed in this just transition processes. So now I move on to, before I open the floor for the question, but I would like to go for this Middle East and North Africa region, the current landscape, and also need for the just transition. Unfortunately, the representative from this MENA region cannot be present today, but I received a memo from the representative. So I will just explain orally what is happening in the MENA region. So the just transition in MENA. In MENA region, of course, the fossil fuel is a very important element for the MENA region because fossil fuel, especially oil and gas, is very important to the MENA economies, especially in the Middle East and Gulf state countries. The sector is providing significant revenues and jobs. And Iraq is one of those examples because revenues from the sales from oil and natural gas makes up more than 90% of Iraq's budget revenue. And also impact of climate change on the MENA region. MENA region is one of the most impacted because of the global climate change. Some of the potential impact can be rise in the sea level, drought, heat waves, sandstorm, damage to the ecosystem, water scarcity, and loss of biodiversity. That is happening in MENA region. And project initiative to reduce CO2 emission in MENA. In order to mitigate the impact of the climate change and reduce CO2 emission, there has been initiative and debate on increasing the use of renewable energies and carbon capture storage system, CCS, in the region, such as solar and wind power plant in Morocco, and CCS project in Gulf states. So luckily, MENA region, one of the richest region in the energy sources, especially the solar power. CCS is the attractive proposition for the hydrocarbon rich Gulf states to invest in this and champion. So it promises to both reduce CO2 emissions and support the Gulf continue to export hydrocarbons over the coming decades. So their vision is for hydrocarbon to remain to central part of the global energy mix, and they are pushing for the top climate priority to be emission reduction rather than fossil fuel use reductions. So international adoption of CCS would enable the Gulf states to continue to export their oil and gas with the emission being captured at the point of use. Morocco renewable energy target among the region's most ambitious as its target 52% of renewable power capacity by 2030. Noah Khourizadate in the northwest Morocco was the largest concentrated solar power plant in the world when it was commissioned in 4 phases in 2016 and 2018. And there are also initiatives on assessing CO2 transport and storage in the West Mediterranean geographical in Spain and Portugal and Morocco. And role of renewable energy in the energy transition. So renewable energy investment across MENA region is very much growing from $1.2 billion in 2008 to almost $11 billion in 2016. A renewable energy target set by all MENA countries are expected to produce no less than combined 80 gigawatt of renewable capacity by 2030. This will lead to creation of the integrated power market across the region. The region is waking up to the recognition of the socio-economic benefit of renewable energy use, and it is seen as a path leading to the industrial diversification, new value chains activity, technology transfer. One of good example of the country has managed to use a renewable energy investment to develop by the local industry in Morocco. By investing in skills capacity building, it managed to create 13,000 new jobs. And so far, there's a serious absence of any forms of regional strategic planning that will help the region towards the just transition within the energy transition propelled by renewable energy. Changes in the industrial production and new technology digitalization are the leading to changes in how production and services are happening. Industrial 4.0 is imposing a change in the roles of the workers and how they interact with their work, with each other, and with their workplaces. For the just change to happen, affiliates of union workers needs to start conversation with their members so that change is embraced and expected. Hard question related to how workers can become involved, redistributed, and upskilled need to be asked and answered through open conversation with different companies working in the energy sector. So these are actually the situation in MENA. Then MENA is actually calling for renewable energy investment across MENA region. And also the workers in MENA are calling for the genuine engagement in the discussion with stakeholders over the transition and its impact on the jobs, employment, and working condition and society as whole. So these are actually the over landscape in this the MENA region, and also the needs from the workers for the just transition. So now I would like to open the floor to everybody. If there's any question, especially to the Sub-Saharan Africa, who is Tendai is present. Also, the Sub-Saharan Africa's the regional secretary, Paul Undensomin, is also present today. So if there's any the question and comment from your country, that would be welcome. So if this is not the case, then I will move to the next session, which is Way Forward, developing our just transition strategy. Oh, by the way, thank you very much, Sister Tendai, for this valuable input for this session. So now I will move to my presentation. Wait, I don't know why I cannot share my screen here. Is Janire now? Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so for this session, I will explain about the way forward, how we should develop our just transition strategy of Industrial Global Union. So I think you all are aware that we have adopted our new action plan last year in September when we had this third Congress of Industrial Global Union. So in this action plan, we actually clearly wrote about the just transition with 5 different points. So one is a fight for just transition, able to handle transformation around climate change, energy transition, digitalization, and any other changes in the economy, industries, and working conditions. And the second point is demand public regulation for just transition and the seat for trade unions at the table for discussion at the company, local, national, regional, and global level to establish basic structures and ground rules through the social dialogue. And third point is demand the establishment of permanent institution, a national observatory, permanent roundtable, or similar to ensure just transition for all affected workers. And fourth point is demand recognition of fundamental labor's rights as a core principle within any discussion. And last but not least, the fifth point is ensure that the strategy policies measure towards the development of sustainable industrial policy, just transition, are gender responsible. So I think we are on the right track on the discussion. We are actually exercising this action plan into our strategic discussion into the incoming COP27, and also strategize our just transition action in coming years. But as we all are aware throughout this session, we need to build our union capacity on the just transition. So what we need is actually we need to gain our concrete knowledge on the new technology and anticipating new field on this the energy transition, and also we need to develop effective tools on the due diligence to organize workers to support union in the supply chain, because without union density, we cannot even involved in the social dialogue. So we need to keep our union leverage in the supply chain, but we need to also make effective use of existing due diligence tool to organize our workers. Then we also need to develop capacity to communicate social dialogue with the multinational company and other key stakeholders in the supply chain and the regions. We actually already been talk about this over the last few hours on how important this is. So, but we need to develop our capacity, and we would concentrate it on this education training session on this capacity training next year. Then mainstreaming gender in the union activities, of course. Then building cross-sector union cooperation to make one voices. This just transition cannot be done within one union, within one sectors. We need cross-sector union solidarity, union cooperation to make our voice heard to the government and the multinational companies as one voice. So this is a kind of our strategy. But what will be the concrete plan for the next few years? These are actually specific the sectors and the regions in our planning. So this is a kind of some example, because we have other many activities, but I just want to highlight those activities for next coming years, because this is heavily related to this energy sector and also the region that we are talking about. November this month, the ILO will organize technical meeting on the future of work in the oil and gas industry. This is all about just transition for oil and gas workers, and we Industrial Labor Union, together with our 8 the workers delegate from our affiliate, we will heavily get involved in the discussion of this technical meeting. So we hopefully demand that to create a new platform of the social dialogue on the just transition for oil and gas workers. So if we can manage some kind of point of consensus, then that will be discussed later in the governing body of ILO. Then that will be approved in International Labour Conference. Then in the next few years, there will be the possibility to develop a new standard guideline or a new platform of the social dialogue to develop just transition process for the future of work. And we are heavily get involved in the promoting just transition at OECD. OECD, we are participating 2 concrete committee and working groups. One is OECD Steel Committee, and one is OECD WP6, which is a shipbuilding working party. This committee and working party is happening twice a year, and we are now strongly demanding just transition discussion in the OECD on this steel and shipbuilding industry, because steel industry is actually heavily fossil fuel consuming industry, as well as the shipbuilding is same. So we are actually, as an industrial global union, we are actively participate in those committee and working party and demand just transition policy into that OECD discussion. Then Kemal or the Glenn has already mentioned responsible mining and just transition. We are heavily get involved in this responsible steel and IRMA. Responsible steel recently renewed their international standard. Now it's version 2, and IRMA standard for the responsible mining. So we are the responsible unions to implement these international standards and for these mining workers and also the supply chain of this energy industry. Then when it comes to a union network or energy, or maybe I need to use this laser pointer, then union network on energy transition and renewable energy. We have started this battery supply chain, renewable energy supply chain at the same time last year. So now we are trying to make this discussion matured so that we can set up policy tools around renewable energy and battery supply chain. And then COP20, by the time of COP28 next year, maybe we need to be more focused on how we can justly phasing out oil and gas or other coal sectors, so that how we can secure these just transition processes, so that we can heavily get involved in the discussion on COP28. But for now, we are now focusing on this COP27 this year. And Diana has already mentioned clearly our union demand for the COP27. Again, COP27, we are focusing on finance and region of Africa. So as a trade union movement, together with ITUC and other global union federation, we will continue to follow up until we set up our union demand for the next COP28. But meanwhile, in the region, as I said, we will concentrate to support the training and education and research and mapping in the specific country or the region or the unions. We already published this guide of practice for the trade union. So we are now planning to have a session on demand. So if the union in the region has concrete demand for the session, we are happy to do this training session on the guide of practice. Even we can invite from the union expert on just transition from other countries to implement their knowledge to other countries. So this is kind of North-South, solidarity activity. And then research and mapping on JT. The many organization has already research and mapping globally, but we are still missing in the particular country or the particular region, so that we need to have some kind of concrete research and mapping on the workers, where the workers are located and what kind of job will be available in that country or region. Otherwise, we cannot get involved in the social dialogue of the discussion of the just transition. And support social dialogue on just transition. So this means we need to maximize and effectively use the existing due diligence tool to support our union to get involved the social dialogue process on the just transition in their countries. So that will be the main, the concrete activity in the regions in the next year. But of course, we will have evaluation at the end of next year. Then we will reflect to review and renew our activity in the region on the just transition. So I stop share screen now. So this is kind of our planning of the just transition in the sectors, in the regions, and this is how we will strategize our just transition activity. So Now it's 4:16. So if you have any question, question and comment, now I would like to open the floor to everybody. Yes, I think the Kemaru is raising his hand, but please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, my dear brother Khan. I think this was a very good session, I can tell you. And I particularly touch upon two things over the comments from our good sisters, Armel and Tendai. In one part of her presentation, Tendai was referring to advancing a due diligence framework in the context of a just transition. I think this is an important point. This is a developing point. When we talk about a framework, indeed, it needs to be a right-based approach. And I can inform the meeting that now there is a debate. There is a debate, particularly the promotion, protection of human rights in the context of climate change, which should be the basis for due diligence framework of this area. The first part is the promotion and the protection of human rights around mitigation, adaptation, and the financial actions to address climate change, particularly in the area of loss and damage. What will be the rights? I think this is something important. Another issue is any implication because of climate change, displacement, actually, particularly crossing international borders. What will be the rights of those people? So our dear comrade from Bangladesh has raised this issue. Then because of climate change, if there is a displacement, internally or internationally, what will be the rights of those people? Another important area is enhancing climate change legislation, which is part of the NDCs, and also supporting climate change litigation and advancing the principle of intergenerational justice. These are the new areas where there is a development. And for sure, it is certainly an area of interest for industrial corporate responsibility and accountability with respect to human rights, labor rights around the climate change, particularly those workers in the industry sectors that are supposed to contribute to climate change. So this area of right-based approach for framing just transition, particularly for due diligence activity, it is something quite important. And I can tell you that this was discussed in the United Nations Human Rights Council and with a report from the special rapporteur. So I think this is something important as response or contribution to what Tendai has really brought to the attention of the meeting. So advancing a due diligence framework in a nationally determined contributions, I think this right-based approach is very much important to frame it. And the second issue that I want to mention is gender issue. Indeed, Armel has referred to gender attentive just transition. And I also want to bring it due diligence around gender. I think this is something important. It is unfortunate that now all the legislations I was referring to in my presentation, there are not real the gender dimensions, because women are particularly vulnerable to harassment, violence in the workplace, They are likely to be discriminated in recruitment, in training, in career opportunities, and they are often paid lower wages than men in the same activities, and they are linked to precarious work, informal or irregular, and these are the issues. Now, when we look at the fundamental rights, now there are 10 conventions, 5 areas. One area is related to Equal Remuneration Convention, Convention 100. Another one is Discrimination in Employment and Occupation, Convention 111. I believe it is now important for us, also for the whole union movement, to base a due diligence framework for gender issues around these 2 fundamental conventions, given the situation of our sisters in the sectors, in the workplaces. So towards the end of this meeting, I just wanted to make these 2 contributions, a bit framing and scaffolding of the debate in the area of just transition in conjunction with the due diligence, because this is the area where there is a huge development. But again, we need a kind of right-based approach for framing the due diligence, particularly in nationally determined contributions, and also bringing the gender dimension to the due diligence area, particularly using the fundamental conventions. I think these 2 areas are in evolution, and all our activities should really end up with that kind of the development in these 2 areas. From that point of view, I have really benefited all the conversation today. I believe this commitment shown by our affiliates, all the participants, is something quite important in moving forward with the dossier of just transition, in defending, advancing rights and interests of our members in all the sectors and workplaces. Over back to you, my dear brother.
Thank you very much, Brother Kemal. I think this is also, you mentioned quite, the comprehensively cover what we actually already, debated today, and valuable input from our colleagues, from our affiliate. Then I think the DD, the due diligence discussion, is very, very important in coming years, especially Tendai is already mentioned. What is the defining just transition in the NDCs? This is actually related to how we can use this due diligence tools into that, how we can define this just transition in the country. NDC is also very much important in the coming years. I see the raised hand from Robbie, so please, Robbie, floor is yours.
Yes, it's a small request, Khan. Yesterday you guided us through the website and to access the publication on guide on just transition. I tried, but I didn't succeed in accessing the document. So if it's possible, maybe it can happen again. Secondly,
yes, yeah, I can do it right now. I think can I ask our press team to put the link in the chat box, our guided practice?
Yes, and secondly is about the availability of the presentations that we have today. Will they be available?
Yes, this presentation and also the recording of this webinar will be available after finishing 3 sessions of this webinar. So okay. Hopefully on Friday or the early next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. So maybe I need to put, can Diana put the link of this guided practice in the chat box? So again, so maybe now it's 4:25. So it's now, I think, the closing this webinar session. Again, thank you very much for your active participation always, during this 3.5 hours. I think this is, we actually receive a very good input from all of your unions. So we will make sure that we will include all of your comment and our then we will strategize our just transition plan in the coming years. So now you see from my colleague Walton put the link of the this guided practice for the just transition. So please use this link. Then again, I would like to mention that as I mentioned yesterday, in coming Friday this week, on the 4th of November, we will organize this joint, the social media storm. So please join our media storm campaign on the 4th of November. Then please use hashtag COP27, Just Transition, Just Future to coordinate the activity of the union in that day. And I would like to remind you that Just Transition posters is also available in English, French, and Spanish in our website. So I'm pretty much encourage you to download and print out this Just Transition poster and holding it and take a picture and send it to us. So that is the the last demand for this webinar. So maybe I will close this session, but before I close, the Kemal, do you have any the last comment? Oh, okay. Otherwise, so thank you very much for your precious time to participate this webinar session number 2 on the Just Transition. And I really appreciate my colleague, who have made a valuable input, and of course, to the old sisters and brothers who actually participate and actively contribute to this webinar, and of course to the interpreters always. Thank you very much for your good job for the interpreters, and have a nice day to all. And thank you very much. And hope I'll see you tomorrow for the webinar session number 3. Thank you very much. Bye.